We all saw the extraordinary scenes on Sunday night in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I've been there. What a city that is. When Brazilian health authorities ran onto the pitch after it came to light that 4 Premier League players involved in the match for Argentina had broken Brazil quarantine rules. Now, these rules, guys, state that anyone from coming in from the UK must quarantine for 14 days on arrival. So the players are Spurs duo, we know, Lo Celso and new boy Christian Romero, and Villa's Martinez and Buendia. And it's come to light now that the Villa players had permission to travel while the Spurs duo did not. I mean, Simon, this is crazy. Now the Spurs pair look set to be reprimanded by their club. But what should the punishment be? And now FIFPro, the International Players Union, say that they'll contest any fines given to the players. Simon, the question is, has this whole debacle finally shown that clubs should always come ahead of country in football, particularly at a time like this? What's it telling you?
Well, it tells you a variety of things. I mean, we discussed it last week, didn't we? We talked about the nature of this particular fixture and the ridiculous idea that it needed to be played in red list countries and the controversy that it would create.
Yeah.
And suggested that a neutral country would have been a far better perspective, because if you're playing in these countries that are red list, I'm assuming spectators aren't allowed inside the stadiums, so there's no real need to play in those stadiums because no one's losing any advantage. And if you take a neutral environment, then it would have taken the sting out of the tail of this.
Yeah. This
comes in line with the central thinking about players and the amount of power that they have inside the game, and the choices that are being made by players that they are sort of overruling clubs. Clubs are acquiescing and curtailing to players, or cowering to players, not curtailing.
Yeah.
Players should have been curtailed. My view is, if you're going to let players have the amount of power, they can put gestures on a pitch, they can take shirts off in international matches, they can refuse to honour contracts, they can do press interviews about which club they want to play for and which club they don't want to play for, you're going to start to empower players to make decisions that are fundamentally wrong. None of these players should have been going to a red list country to play in international football. I'm sorry that they don't like it. I'm sorry that they think it's part of their career. I've sat here and watched people in my family have funerals that I can't go to because of the COVID situation. I've watched people around the world suffer as a result of COVID situation. If players can't play during a time when the world's upside down because of a red list country situation, then they should have accepted it, and the club should have had some more backbone, rather than start from a position of saying we're all going to say no, to clubs then going, oh, I'll be a bit mealy-mouthed about it. Now, Tottenham's situation is slightly different. Players have done precisely what they want, and there need to be consequences.
Yeah, the Villa boys had permission.
And FIFA, well, I think that's weak on Villa's part. They've backed down to player power. The Tottenham players have gone against the club's wishes, and if FIFPro have one degree of substance about them, they should be looking at their players going, hang on a second here. Not only have you gone against your club's rules, you don't even know the quarantine rules of the country that you're going into. It's not Aston Villa's responsibility to know the quarantine rules of Brazil or Argentina. That's the players that want to go, that should know that. So Tottenham's players have gone against their club's directive. They've gone to a country where they've breached the quarantine rules of the country. How in God's name is this, in any shape or parallel universe, defensible by anybody?
Exactly. I mean, Tony, Villa's one of your former clubs. Emiliano Martinez says post-match, it wasn't a match, but he says Aston Villa did not understand the Brazilian regulations and why it happened. Even though all the Premier League didn't want us to come, we decided to come anyway. I mean, Simon's right. They've taken it upon themselves just to go.
Yeah, I wouldn't go along the lines of clubs. It's not their decision making or shouldn't be involved. Obviously, they're their employees for players, so they should be involved in every step of the way for an international player, whether they go abroad. Now, it used to be club versus country, yeah? Mm-hmm. Now we have club, country, government, federations. Yeah. So you've got 4 in the mix who are all making their state. They're you've got players, even the quarantine rule when they come back. Can the Chilean or the Mexican federations ban players from playing Premier League games when they get back? Which they can do under FIFA rules.
Yeah.
So it's a real mixture. The cocktail's disastrous in the first place. I'm with Simon on why these players going in the first place, and should it be solely left for the players to make their own decision? It's look, I come from a time where we could choose to go and play for a country, but football's moved on a hell of a lot,
sure.
And we've had the pandemic to experience as well.
But it wasn't left to the players' tone. The players aren't left to it. The clubs made their views very clear from the outset. We don't want you going to these fixtures. And then what you've got is the obligations that clubs have, that they must release players to international federations, and then you have the players themselves saying, I want to go. So really what should have happened was clubs say no, players say we understand the circumstances, federations step off. But they didn't want to. Oh. The players are the issue, because if the players had turned around and said, we accept we're living in very strange times.
Which some have done.
Well, not these players.
No, not these ones.
Villa's tried to find a compromise.
which was give them what they want, and then let them go and play 2 out of 3 games, and then find out that actually they were going to play all 3.
The Liverpool.
I mean, Villa made an agreement though, 2 out of 3, didn't they?
Yes, but then you find out that actually the Argentinian coach turned around and said there was no such agreement. So what you've got basically is an absolute degradation of responsibility from the players, a complete and utter disregard for the principles of the countries they're playing in, and an absolute mess. And what it does is it shows you the things I keep saying about football, which is an immature, arrogant, self-indulgent attitude that thinks he can do what he wants. You can't fly into a country with 14-day quarantine and rock onto a football pitch. You just can't.
Yeah.
There were a number of players that chose not to go on international duty as well. You know, not these players we're talking about.
Yeah.
There are players that
for sure, Tony.
There were a number of players.
So what would you do if you were Daniel?
I'm not sure who those players were, because the 9 players that were called up for Brazil and Argentina are the ones that were in focus here. So all of these players made a play for wanting to go. And some of the players have then put back in their box and respected their employers and said, OK, Thiago at Chelsea sent a motive out saying, my hands are tied mentality. What should happen to them? Well, the genie's out of the bottle. It's irrelevant to what the consequence is now. The consequence has to be something. And when you get ridiculous assertions like FIFPro popping up and saying somehow these players are slaves and need to be handled, and anything that they get sanctioned for, we're going to resist.
Okay, is there one final point? Why did it have to get to the stage where players are going onto the football pitch? Why could this have not been dealt with way earlier? Because obviously the governments and federations knew that players had travelled.
Well, I think you've got a Brazil-Argentina thing there.
Was it a set-up
because
signing?
they lied on their admission forms, these players, to be able to go on the pitch. Now, of course, you can advance the argument that actually...
Why start the match?
Well, because the team sheets are put in a certain time.
But Saturday night there was a meeting.
And apparently the players... You understand that? And obviously there's some political positioning going on between the two countries and a little bit of a juxtaposition to create a scenario. But irrespective of the method of delivery of the outcome, it shouldn't have ever got to this position where these players are even there. They can't play. They've got a 14-day quarantine. They can't play. You're asking someone to defend the indefensible. This is like sitting here listening to Gordon Taylor flapping his gums about the justification for Riyad Mahrez downing tools and refusing to play for his football club and defending the indefensible.
Yeah.
The players made a choice, and the consequences of that the clubs should have the gift, unencumbered and unfettered by unions, to say, right, we will sanction these players to the optimum level, and whatever that sanction is, we have the ability to do it. Now, whether we do it or not is another matter, because you've still got to manage the players and still manage their relationship. I think you've got to concentrate people's minds, because if you don't set precedents in some football club, everybody thinks they can behave in a certain way.
What do you think of Howard, who's a Northampton Town fan? Tony, he's having a bit of a swipe at you. Sam, Chelsea fan, I'm coming to you, but this is what he says Howard, I don't understand Tony appearing to criticise the Brazilian authorities. It's like blaming the police for not stopping a speeding driver sooner. Argentina players knew they were breaking the rules in attempting to play in the game. The players should have been arrested, charged and kept in Brazil until a court case gets underway.
My point wasn't that I'm criticising the Brazilian authorities. I'm criticising maybe it could have happened a lot earlier. And look, there seems like there was a standoff here that Brazil ended up taking it to the very furthest line they could and had the right to, as that to get to the game. Could have been stopped way before, in my opinion.
Yeah. But
before it got to that. It was a meeting Saturday night, the night before the game, about these players, what they'd done and what they'd done wrong.
But Tony, the fact the game started and then had to stop and then they all troop off has given it worldwide publicity because of a flaunting of the rules. Surely they've been caught red-handed. Sam is a big Chelsea fan. Sam, good morning to you.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Good, mate. Good. Where do you stand in this, Sam?
I really don't think we should feel sorry for the players. I think they get remunerated quite nicely in their pay packets, and they sign contracts to say, X, Y, Z. If you have to miss this game for this particular reason, as Simon said, the world's been turned upside down. I actually myself lost both my grandparents due to COVID, and it hit us quite hard. And I think during this period, everybody's been, the everyday working Joe's been looking up to footballers as a way to take everyone's mind off what's going on.
Yes.
And, they're doing these sorts of things. I just don't think it's right. And people have been looking up to these players, and it's just not right what they're doing. And it's almost like they don't care. And then you've had the whole Matt Hancock fiasco. That's a different story. But it's the same thing every time. People in the spotlight, they should know that they're going to be all over social media. They should know that what they're doing is wrong, and they're going to get backlash off it.
Sam, thank you for that. Sorry to hear about your grandparents.
And where the problem is that football will now have to listen to to drivel from FIFA Pro and probably the PFA about how these players should be defended from this. This is where the problem manifests itself, because rather than say, this is wrong, we all know it's wrong, they defend the indefensible, and what it does is it alienates people from players, alienates people from the game of football, because it's clear, it's evident. Nobody gets to do, whether we like it or we don't, and I don't like it, what they want in this particular set of circumstances surrounding the world. If you're flying into a red list country, it's not... This statement from Martinez embodies the arrogance of a modern-day footballer. Why is it Aston Villa's responsibility to know what the policy is for the 14-day quarantine to go and play in a country that he wants to go and play in, and his club didn't want him to go in the first place?
No, but Simon, his club gave him permission to go.
No, their club backed down to the players' demands. The players made it clear that they wanted to play for their country, and you're stuck in this invidious position as a club owner going, you're going to do as you're told. No, I'm not. I'm able to go. You're going to do as you're told. No, I'm going. I'll tell you what then, we'll give you a concession, we'll let you play 2 out of 3. And then you find they get there and they're going to play 3 out of 3.
Tony, it seems, I mean, the whole thing is a massive confusion. When you look at Emiliano Martinez's statement, Aston Villa did not understand the Brazilian regulations and why it happened.
Well, I think Aston Villa have a duty to know, and whether it's just down to the player. Yeah, I don't agree with what the players have done. If it had been me and asked that decision whether I go the other side of the world and it was a red-listed country, would I go? No, I wouldn't go. But that's, we can't answer for everybody. Not everybody does the same thing. Yeah. But I do think as an employer of a football club and as employees, you must know the duties of what they should and shouldn't be doing.
Well, absolutely.
I can't go along with just saying, why should they know? They should,
you are right in principle that ultimately, because they are their players, that they should have a broad brush understanding of what they're experiencing. But it doesn't alleviate the central responsibility being with the individual.
Yeah, totally.
Because the people that suffer the most are the clubs when it comes back to have 10 days quarantine. So he was going over there. You're quite right. If the club said to him, by the way, you do realise when you go over there, you ain't going to kick a ball because you're going to be in 14 days quarantine, that might have dissuaded them from making that decision in the first place.
Exactly. That is my point. The club have a responsibility as well.
It's a crazy statement from Martinez. He says, even though the Premier League didn't want us to come, we decided to go anyway. I mean, what? Simon's right. What are you thinking about?
Look, there's two sides of the same coin, if you like, really, because I do think the club have responsibility, but also mainly the players even more so.
I think this is great because I think it will bring it to a head. Well, I think it will concentrate people's minds, because only when you get a ridiculous scenario like this do people start getting their heads cracked and people start getting their minds concentrated.
But having said that, Simon, is it too late for a punishment? John, big Man United fan, he thinks maybe it is. John, good morning.
You're all right, Jim. You're all right, Simon. You're all right.
Good, mate. Good. What's your take on this? Is it too late for a punishment?
Well, basically, I think what the problem is, player power has got that strong now and out of control. What punishments can you give them? I mean, you can deduct some wages. That ain't going to affect them because the amount of money they're earning. The Premier League clubs aren't going to ban them for games because it'll reduce their chances at the league. So there's not really a great deal you can do.
Well, what can they do? I mean, Simon, it's a good point. And do you know what's on the horizon? 2 more international breaks, one in October, one in November.
Well, what you can do is you can sanction people. You can't do nothing, otherwise you're condoning it. Now, if you can pull a 14-year-old boy for some tweet he made 9 years ago, you can pull an international footballer for breaching international law. Right? So let's get it right. There has to be a consequence. You're naming and shaming these players. They're made to look silly. And there has to be a set of rules in place. You can't now make rules up on the fly. We can't now say, actually, we've decided to pull one out of our backside. You can't go on the next international trip. That's not a rule that exists, so you can't make it up as you go along.
Can I ask you a question quickly on this, Jim? Simon, how many times did you fine players and you actually took the fine at a football club?
Every bloody time.
Because lots
of
times...
Did you always make them pay?
No.
Absolutely. Depends what fine it is. If it's a manager kind of saying you're late, that's his responsibility. He puts it in the cup, goes to charity.
Okay.
If it's a player going out on radio and criticising the team or doing something that's against the club's policy... Every time.
No, and
twice on Sunday.
As you know, quite regularly in football, there's many a club that fined a player that the player never paid the fine. Sure. Because obviously, if they were going to upset...
Mate.
Not at your club, okay.
Yeah, but Tony, bear in mind, you are on the court of Judge Jordan.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Thursday morning, 10 till 1. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.